Hello and welcome back to the channel, where once again it's time for another Sega Saturn review, with me today taking a look at the original Panzer Dragoon, a game which for myself personally was a standout title, certainly at least in regards to three-dimensional visuals, at least within the first year of the Saturn's life. Panzer Dragoon first saw release in Japan in March of 1995, before coming out in North America in May, and then finally seeing a PAL release in August of the same year. It's worth pointing out that it did also get a PC release a little while later. Like always, I'll be talking about how it performs in regards to visual, sound, gameplay, and content and lifespan before deciding whether it's still worth playing today or not, and has the quality to feature in either or potentially both of my PAL Top 10 and worldwide Top 10s. The story for Panzer Dragoon is set in the distant future, several thousands of years after a great war between humans and their biologically engineered weapons. The game's main protagonist, if you want to call him that, is Kiel Flug, a hunter who, after seeing an Imperial battleship in the sky, is attacked by two creatures and chases one of them into a large ancient complex. As he explores the ruin and sees relics of all the old technologies hanging from the ceiling, another creature attacks him, and although his weapon is useless against this armored creature, a rumbling triggers a cave-in which crushes the monster and saves Kiel. After regaining consciousness outside, he sees two dragon riders fighting in the sky above him, where one rider is mortally wounded in the chest. As the blue dragon carrying him flies towards Kiel, a psychic connection is made between him and the rider, with Kiel being told not to let the black dragon reach the black tower. As the rider dies, Kiel picks up his gun, climbs on top of the dragon, and flies away in an attempt to finish the rider's quest. Once you hit the main menu, you'll see you've got a choice of beginning the game or heading into options. Within the options menu, you have the choice of selecting inverted or standard up and down controls, checking the control pad layout, as well as a few sound options too. It's worth mentioning that you can select different difficulties when you start the game, but if you choose to play the game on the easy setting, you only have access to the first 4 levels. Like always, I'll start with the visuals first, and I think the large majority of people would agree that Panzer Dragoon was indeed the standout 3D game on the system upon its release in all territories. To start with, the character models look very good for this point in time, with your dragon looking well detailed and also very well animated. This carries over into the enemy models, with some of the larger enemies and ships that you face being visual highlights from within the game. If this wasn't enough for you, you have wonderfully varied level designs too, as you travel through locations such as a drowned city, a vast desert, ancient ruins, and a high-tech underground facility, among others, with many of the areas that you explore feeling vast and expansive thanks to the Saturn's VDP-2 chip and the way it drew infinite scrolling planes, but also some slightly more cramped and claustrophobic environments too. What this does is give you plenty of graphical variation, as you never know quite where you'll be flying through next. Weapon effects and explosions are also of reasonable quality by mid-1995 standards too. This doesn't mean that the game is perfect though, as despite performing very well overall, there is some minor slowdown in the most action-packed of areas, with the game also having fairly noticeable pop-up on certain levels, and of course the trademark satin mesh transparencies. Despite these minor flaws though, on the whole, Panzer Dragoon remains visually appealing to this day, mainly due to its unique and mystical style of presentation. Moving on to sound effects and music, and if you've played any of the 3 Panzer Dragoon games on the Saturn, then you will probably know roughly what I'm going to say. Panzer Dragoon is a fantastic sounding game in every aspect, with some truly memorable and dramatic tunes which match the visual style and setting of the game incredibly well, possibly better than any other game from around this point in time. What the music also does is help create an even bigger sense of scope and freedom as you fly around on the dragon, even though you are of course on a fixed path, which I feel is an incredible achievement. Indeed, I don't think I could possibly say a single bad thing about any of the musical tracks within the game, with both the title screen music and the Stage 1 theme being particular highlights. Thankfully, the quality of the sound effects is also incredibly high too, as you relentlessly blast down waves of enemies and take on massive ships, with the explosion effects also being very satisfying, much like the cries of your dragon. Unlike visuals within games though, that usually fade and become less impressive over time, audio is slightly different, meaning that Panzer Dragoon is just as impressive now as it was 30 years ago. So to back up all the positive things I've said about the music within the game, it's only fitting that I give you some samples. In regards to the gameplay, Panzer Dragoon is a very simplistic on-rail shooter with you moving your dragon with the D-pad and firing your weapons with the A, B or C buttons, with you repeatedly tapping the buttons for your primary shot or holding the button to lock onto multiple enemies at once before firing. You can also change the camera view slightly with the X, Y and Z buttons and rotate the camera in 90-degree segments with the R and L buttons, something that you'll have to do at various points in the game, as you can be attacked not only from in front of you or behind, but from either side of you as well. You can also perform a barrel roll as well by double tapping the D-pad in a direction, but take into account your health bar must be flashing red for you to be able to execute it, unless of course you input the rolling mode code on the main menu, and then you'll be able to perform it whenever you want. The flow of the game is also very straightforward as you maneuver your dragon and rider through each stage, taking down the various enemies that you come across whilst trying to avoid enemy fire before facing off against the end of level bosses. If you're a fan of simple pick up and play shooters with relentless action, then Panzer Dragoon will be right up your street. But on the other hand, if you like games with far more depth and varied gameplay, then you might not find Panzer Dragoon to be that satisfying. Moving on to content and lifespan, and like so many games on the Saturn, this is the main issue with Panzer Dragoon. The game has only 6 main stages, with a final stage where you face off against the very final boss, with a playtime of around 40 minutes. One positive point is the fact that there are plenty of full motion video sequences depicting the story, which helps break the game up nicely, but of course once you've seen it once, there is no real incentive to see it again. The game is a one-player only experience, so it doesn't have any replay value in regards to multiplayer either. What it does have though is a few different cheat codes that can be input on the main menu, giving you access to a few different things. First of all, you can access Episode 0, an extra level, where you face wave after wave of enemies in an attempt to get your highest score. What you can actually do with this is simply take it in turns with a friend to see who can get the highest score, so in this regard you could say the game has a little bit of multiplayer value. You can also gain access to a couple of slightly different weapon options too, with one being a rapid fire style attack and the other being a more powerful piercing style shot, but neither of these really add any replay value to the game. You can also input a level select code, meaning you can simply play through any of your favourite levels at will, although with all of the levels being equally enjoyable and not being particularly long, it doesn't really add much in my opinion. You can also input a code to play the game in wizard mode, which simply increases the speed of the game, and also input codes for infinite, continues and and invincibility. The slightly more interesting cheat codes enable you to fly around only as the dragon, assuming you can get this code to work, something I couldn't. And even more interesting than this, there is a code that lets you simply go through the levels as the rider alone, known as Space Harrier mode, which in all fairness does look rather odd, as he is simply floating in mid-air. The bizarre thing about this code, to my knowledge at least anyway, is that it will only work if the console's internal language is set to German. For the sake of experimenting, I have actually tried it with the console set in other languages, and it does indeed not work. And even though there are a fair amount of cheat codes in total that you can access within the game, it doesn't change the fact that Panzer Dragoon, whilst being thoroughly enjoyable, is a relatively short-lived affair with minimal replay value. As always, that leaves me with my two final questions. Is Panzer Dragoon still worth playing nowadays, and does it have the quality to make my PAL top 10 or indeed my worldwide top 10? First of all, Panzer Dragoon is still well worth a playthrough, especially if you've never experienced it, as the game still possesses a certain level of mystique and charm despite it now being 30 years old. If you're a gamer though that doesn't like going back to relatively old titles because you feel they look outdated visually, then you can of course try the Panzer Dragoon remake, which was released back in 2020 on modern platforms. I have previously reviewed this game too on the channel, so of course feel free to check that review out after you finish watching this one, of course. Now in regards to whether Panzer Dragoon is good enough to be in my PAL top 10 or my worldwide top 10, what I will say is that if it was a top 10 being made from the first year of the console's life, then it would have easily made this list and probably been in the top 3 in all fairness. But when you look at it in comparison to every other game on the system and all of the games that are currently in my PAL top 10 or worldwide top 10, then Panzer Dragoon simply falls short, with its biggest problem being lack of content and replay value, something that was a big issue in quite a few of the games that the Saturn had. Like I always say though, these are my thoughts and my thoughts alone, and as always I want to hear everybody else's thoughts on Panzer Dragoon. Did you pick it up on release on the Saturn or the PC, or have you played the remake on a current gen system? Let me know your thoughts down below on Panzer Dragoon, and like always, I'll be back in the near future with another Saturn review. Goodbye for now.